All right. Well, that last video must have got in there by mistake, I think. But
A bit chilling.
yeah, good chilling. Yep. Cara, thank you so much for being here today.
You're absolutely welcome. So glad you asked.
Yep. How was your Valentine's Day weekend?
Um, well, if water be love, I was festooned with it with two major plumbing leaks. So apart
Oh.
from that, all was great. So a bit different, a bit different.
Yes, it was a good Lupercalia, I think, for
The old Roman festival, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Incidentally, on one of the trailers that you played there, you had the Cottingley fairies. I've got some witch memorabilia that was dug up from one of those old houses in
Oh,
Cottingley.
wow.
I don't have it with me in this room. It's outside in my museum, and it's absolutely blowing a gale and raining, so I'm not going to go out and get it. But if someone ever sees what I do on stage, they'll see those items on the stage with it. But it was just lovely to see the Cottingley fairies in that.
That is fantastic. I am very jealous. Paul Budini had promised me to take me on a tour of that site. I might not have. I probably shouldn't have said it out loud because I don't think you're technically allowed to go to that area. It's private property. But so I have to take him up on it.
After midnight?
Yeah. Yeah. Who cares, right? I mean, come on. It's a significant paranormal site. Any paranormalist worth his or her salt would definitely go to.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, exactly. So, Cara, thank you again for being here. I'm glad we're finally able to get you on. And I know it's 11 or midnight there right now. But
it is midnight.
Yeah.
It is within the chimes of the witching hour, so I am fine. My natural time to be awake and being productive, one shall say.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I hope the energy is able to keep you awake and functioning for the course of our interview.
Absolutely. That and the coffee I've been drinking just beforehand, rocket fuel. So I'm absolutely stoked and really delighted you asked me on here to be interviewed. When you see the caliber of people that you have, that you're presenting online, it's rather fabulous.
Cara, you're easily at the same caliber as those performers we've had on here. I've seen you perform. You're wonderful. You was actually a year ago. Last month, I think it was. Yeah, when you were there, and then
That's right. When I was in Baltimore.
Yeah. So did you accidentally write on the back of a prescription receipt that resulted in the pandemic of 2020? Write a spell. I don't know if you remember Aleister Crowley had did that. He had one on writing on the back of a.
No, but I cursed an Aer Lingus plane for having bad air meals, but that didn't. Nothing's happened to an Aer Lingus plane, but unless that was the start of it, I don't know.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, you gotta those spells are finicky. You have to get them just right, or
absolutely got to tinker to get them just perfect.
Exactly. Well, thank you again for being on here. So tell me, how did you get your start in the mystery arts? What is that? What made you interested in it, and then get jumping in on it, and then making that basically your career currently? I mean, it's
a very strange story. It actually started with, how do I say this without actually saying it? It started off with having premonitions. I started having premonitions of things happening, and I had 3 weeks where I had 3 premonitions that came true, and they were big disasters, which is why I'm kind of, you don't want to say, well, I saw this, that, and the next thing. You don't kind of want to gloat about things like that. But because I saw that, I started thinking, okay, let's investigate the supernatural a bit. So I did. And as I was inquiring, one of the things I got to see, I was on holiday at a place called Southport, which is in Lancashire, south of Blackpool. It's kind of like the posher end of that coastline, I suppose you could call it. And I saw in a shop window a crystal ball, and I thought, I've got to have that crystal ball. And in all fairness, the best way to describe it would be a giant glass marble as opposed to a crystal ball. It was kind of this size, whereas the one I use now is like this, if I were to hold it in my hands. So I started using the crystal ball, and I was interested in stage magic at the same time. And I started to think about, this is what the old shamans were about. They were using little bits of illusion in with their actual scrying work and their healing work. And I looked at both of those sides, the psychic or the witchy and the performing, at the same time. So they both grew up together. It wasn't one or the other. But if I was, for instance, I was pretty soon reading tarot for people and using that crystal ball marble for people until I got the big mother one. And I was doing these readings for people, and I was able to keep the performing side separate for someone who wanted a genuine reading. And if someone wanted a good stage production, I could do that at the same time and remain okay with that, which I know a lot of performers find difficult to do, but for me it's not a problem in the slightest. Perhaps it says I've got larceny in my soul, I don't know, but it's certainly, that's how it started, and it's grown organically ever since. I never intended initially to make the way of performing with the more arcane arts a way to make a living. It was never my thought process, but what it did do was lots of people were interested. And because lots of people were interested, shows just started to happen organically. And normally the shows today, I may be jumping ahead to a question you're going to ask later, but the shows today have grown the exact same way, so that what people see is some's real, some's not. I'm certainly not going to tell anyone which is which. That's up to them. And it's a rather delicious thing, because when people come, it's been doing me great wonders ever since I started performing professionally, 10 years ago? But it's only been the last 5 I've really gone, shall we say, to the dark side with it. And again, that has been absolutely stupendous. So I hope I've answered that question for you.
Hmm. Well, we did have a question in the comments, and C. Common Nick aus England. You're not you're not originally from England, though, correct?
No, I'm actually German. Despite my accent, I'm actually German. I'm from Dusseldorf. But I live in the north of England at the moment, but my accent, if people understand where my accent's from, I'm from, well, my accent is from the Glasgow area of Scotland, because that is where the majority of my growing up has taken place. So my accent is Scottish. I would love to add more German back into it, because it would just sound a bit more exotic, especially if I'm performing around Glasgow.
Yeah. How old? Do you think that heritage has influenced your performance at all, or?
Yes. I think because you're a performer yourself, you understand that when you perform in different areas of a country or countries, you see different things. You see different cultural norms, whether it be dress, methods of speech, the mythology, the thought processes of everywhere, and all of those things together, added when you put them in, it makes you a much more rounded performer. But the interesting thing when you work on the bizarre or witchy side of things is that you see where things tie together. For instance, If we think about Hinduism and Old Norse religions, you've got exact same characteristics and stories with the blacksmith gods, for instance. You could basically say it's the same one. And the fact they're both so far apart, they've obviously had the same origin. So that is a super thing, to see the things that tie things together and myth together. But when it gets to culture, you have different characters that you can almost channel into. For instance, with Germany, you've got Erik Jan Hanussen, someone who I speak a lot about when I do my more spirit-inclined shows. He was an incredible character, and speaking about him, I can speak about it with a bit more authority because I'm from the country, but it also means there's something in your blood. It's a little bit like, trying to think of the correct word for it. It's almost like, it's like water weaving together. It's heritage weaving together. And you can link onto it because I've got the Scottish aspect, I've got the German aspect. Whatever I want to speak about, if I can link onto it, it comes across so much more authentic because the interest is authentic. Because I'm not an actor. And because of that, if an audience is watching you, they've got to think, hey, she's speaking about this from the heart. And genuinely I am. But it comes across that way because that link is there, because there's the German link, there's the Scottish link, and there's the links to other different aspects, such as witchcraft, which is what you build me as. So I'm surprised I don't have churchmen at the door with holy water. In fact, that maybe have been the plumbing problem. It's been the holy water getting thrown at the house.
Yep. I may have experienced similar situations in the past. I had a seance parlor right across the street from a Presbyterian church. So that was an interesting experience years ago. But so before we get into talking a little bit more about witchcraft, which is a very interesting topic on its own, how do you feel about some of the criticisms? You're also a bizarrist, a bizarre magician.
Yes.
And it would be fair to call you a paranormalist as well. I think
call me whatever you like.
they overlap quite a bit, often enough.
Yes, they do. They do.
How do you feel about some of the criticisms of bizarre magic that you get from mainstream magicians?
A lot of the time, I think mainstream magicians, they feel they've got this, they're in this club of their own, and we are trying to take it to some kind of darker place. But I don't feel they don't get it. And I'm not quite sure how we make them understand what we are doing. Because what we are doing essentially is the modern version of what the, as I mentioned earlier, what the old-fashioned shamans used to do, from when people were in caves pointing up with a bone at the end of the finger, or trying to heal people like Santa Claus coming down the chimney, the old Finnish shamans being portrayed in our modern Christmas myth. We're doing the exact same thing. And there's two things which excite people for different reasons, and that is life and death. And when you're at the periphery of both of those, it's a scary place to be. It could be a brand new land full of wonderful places to explore, if that be your mindset. And at the same time, it could be scary. It could be something which makes you feel most alive. Because I was mentioning today in my tarot broadcasts, I was trying to elicit a response from people, and this relates directly to the question that you asked. And that is, death is the most intimate experience we can have in life. We are on that edge of that. When you watch a horror movie, you know you're safe. You're watching this movie, you jump, you're glass of Coke jumps out your hand, maybe you need a cuddle because scary things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
We do that on stage. And because we do that on stage, we are asking those metaphysical questions which don't really have answers. That's kind of why they're metaphysical, I suppose. They don't have answers, but we're putting keys out there to open doors for people to explore it themselves. So it's not just an entertainment that we're providing something that says, hang on a minute, something wonderful just happened there, but what's next? What's the next step with that? And we are opening up minds. And that's the key thing. That's the important thing. And one of the things that, and I do want to mention this because it's a big bugbear with me, when we hear, in fact, when I was last at the Blackpool Magic Convention, wonderful place, wonderful event, I was listening to a table beside me, and a few of the people at the table were criticizing bizarre magic. Now, I did not interrupt and say, excuse me. I simply wanted to listen. And one of the things that was being said is, oh, they're the ones who also read tarot cards. They're the ones that do crystal ball readings. They're in that charlatan area, the ones who are trying to con people. And I know where that comes from. They have never actually been, for instance, and seen a medium on stage just for talking's sake. But they're willing to take it on trust from other magicians who have a platform, who say, oh, these people are all fake, they're all fraudulent, and they just parrot the same thing. And as I've said to other magicians who I know personally, and they have had that viewpoint, I've said, well, why don't you see one of these presentations and see what you think? The average person going to a medium's show, I've done them myself, the average person is groups of people out there, they're drinking wine, they're having a great time, they're not taking it too seriously. If something comes close to them, they do listen to it, but they're not going to be fooled easily. They're not there just to be gullible. Otherwise, they'd be living in, well, who knows what, because they wouldn't have any common sense, but they do have common sense. And this is one of the problems I think magicians have as a group with bizarre. They don't understand that when it comes to tarot, being a spiritualist and so on, the occult, that we actually have ethics. We're very ethical people, and we do things for the benefit of people who are in front of us, but we're entertainers, and we want to do something that answers those metaphysical questions, as I say, of life and death, that makes their mind just sizzle, their mind's alive, and they think, wow, this is super. The one issue we perhaps do have in this regard is that you have some of these people who think, oh, these bizarrists are having lots of fun, let's get into that. And they're not properly prepared to work in our field. And they use methods which come across as hokey, where really, it would be really good if there was some kind of training program, because you are probably like me, your bizarre growth was over years and years, and it grows organically, and when it grows legs and starts to run, you've really done one hell of a initiation so that you come across as authentic. A lot of these people still come across, if they have not done that, as if they have just stopped balloon modeling and started communing with spirit. It doesn't work.
Yep, the my balloon seance will be coming up very soon, by the way.
And I'm now on a hit list of 1 million magic circles.
So we have this comment. I'll read it out loud. I think they hear too much about, this is from Damien Mundane. I think they hear too much about how Houdini would expose mediums and think that it is a crusade they should take part in, like they are part of the club, as you said earlier. They forget that historically, magic shows have were heavily constructed with bizarre themes. All right, let me put this down there.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you for your point, Damien. It's lovely you're watching, so thank you.
Yeah.
On that vein of what you just said, the reason Houdini, when many of us watching this will realize this, so I'm saying something we already know, but Houdini went into the seance world because he wanted to believe and wanted to contact his mother. As such, this man that most magicians revere, quite rightly, he wanted to believe. And that's the crucial thing. But the last thing that Damien mentioned is the bizarre themes that have run across. At the start of the 20th century, when stage magicians were the rock stars of the time, people like Howard Thurston, Harry Keller. Harry Keller did a stage act, and I've wanted to do this myself. If I had a show big enough, I would do it, where he would sit at one end of the stage, decapitate himself, and his head would travel to the other side of the stage. And then his body would get up and walk to it, sit on another chair. They would be reunited again, and then he would stand and take a bow. Nothing is as freaky as that. That is as bizarre as it comes. It's going back to ancient Egypt and the pharaonic priest Dedi cutting the heads off of animals and putting them back together, and the animals magically just run off. It's in that vein. It's absolutely wonderful stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to tell mainstream magicians sometimes that if me and Cara were sitting in a restaurant and over at the table were a group of your run-of-the-mill IBM SAM sort of crowd of magicians here in the States in particular, in the time traveling magicians of old, Dante and Thurston and Keller, their ilk came into the room, they would sit at our table and they would point over and say, "What happened?"
In fact, do you know, there's a really good anecdote we should mention in regard to this. When I was performing at your theatre,
mm-hmm.
we were in the restaurant in the Lord Baltimore Hotel, and we were doing one or two things. I think it was Esp cards we were using. We were hands over and trying to get the right answers. And a man came across to our table because he was watching. "What were you just doing there?" And then he asked if he could see something that we did. So we showed a couple of ESP items to him, and he was so blown away that he paid for our dinners and our drinks that night. Yeah. And that there shows the power of not balloon animals, but showing something that leads to something else. That's showing that parapsychology, that paranormal aspect. People think, what else is out there? I've just seen something special.
Mm-hmm. And don't get us wrong. All magic has its places. There's lots of really amazing, incredible mainstream magic out there. A lot of people are doing really good jobs, but what bizarre magic and narrative style magic specifically is what we're really talking about. A unique, original narrative magic has to offer even mainstream magicians is uniqueness. That's the bottom line. It's like I always say, don't forget the spooky stuff. Yeah, we like that. That's cool. But it's basically uniqueness. No one confuses one of our shows with any other magician. If you want to be if you don't want to be just the magician for the night, taking some pointers from narrative magic shows where everything has a point, everything makes sense, everything has a reason for existing. That makes your show that much more different. And
Absolutely.
you think I'm describing your show, like, well, I already do that. I already have a narrative show where everything makes. Well, then you're a bizarre magician. You just haven't embraced that, a self-realization yet.
Yes. I'll mention two things because I feel I don't want to come across as being anti-general magic. I would never want to come across as that, because I love doing torn and restored tissue paper, the Jingling Su stuff. I love using ropes through people. I love using linking rings. I don't perform these things anymore, but they're wonderful. I love sitting and watching a good magic show because it's super entertaining. But you hit the nail on the head describing the bizarre side of things as being something unique and having a narrative that is all of its own. It's like I once heard Uri Geller say, don't copy anyone else, because lots of people wanted to bend spoons. So no, don't bend spoons. I did that, it's been done. Do something else. Do something that's just you. And believe in yourself and just go for it. And that's what bizarre magic does. We all have our own ways. Initially, Penn and Teller, I think, would be described as bizarre magic because of their approach. Now it's in the general sphere because the general sphere has broadened a bit to include them. With what some of the wonderful guests you've had on, like Vlad, for instance, Gothic vampire, as perhaps traditional when it comes to bizarre, but a lot of us are drawn by that. I'm drawn by witchcraft, vampirism, Gothic horror, all the wonderful things. Well, I am in the country where a lot of this began. It would be most rude not to imbue myself with it. But a lot of these different acts of magic that we do, and our acts are unique. And we do unique things. I'm going to turn around for 2 seconds just to grab something to show to you. You may have, I can't remember if I did these at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, but I have these 2 witches' effigies, which are real. This one, no, this one here that I'm holding, this one is 17th century.
Wow.
I used that in demonstrations on stage. In fact, it was in my luggage going to Baltimore. So if my luggage was checked, who knows what the handlers or customs people might have thought. And this one here is real as well, but this is about 1900. And I'll put this close to the screen. You can see the nails in it.
That's fantastic.
And those nails are what I dated to show they were 1900. And this was under the floorboards of a house. So these were under the floorboards. And a friend of mine was a builder and asked me to come over and have a look. And that's why I've got it. That's kind of partly what I do when I'm on stage. I have real artifacts that are there. And that's part of what sets me apart. But that's one of the things, to try and be different, try and be unique, and ask those searching questions. That it's not just, let's applaud, what a great night, but it's when someone's in bed that night and maybe a year later thinking, I saw that woman do something really bizarre with that. That means something. Where does that go to from here? That's when we know we have done a good job, and we have opened people's minds a little bit more, because it's not just an act we are doing. It's a bit more than that. It's metaphysical, it's searching, it's psychological, and it's mind expanding.
Nadine Anderson says she remembers you doing that, and that you had a key too.
Oh yes, I remember that, yes. Thank you very much for reminding me, Nadine. Thank you for watching as well. I do hope you enjoyed the show, if it was the one at Baltimore that you saw.
Well,
Thanks for your comments.
You said yes with 3 S's, so I think that means she definitely enjoyed the show. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Nadine.
So that's a good way to transition into how would you describe your performance style? Like if you had to.
Well, you asked me that before we went on air,
Mhm.
and my flippant response was a professional lecturer mixed with spooky bitch. And I suppose that is what we could describe it as. But what I'm trying to get across, my stage persona was born out of A, experience, and B, sitting down and thinking, who do I want to be? How do I want people to perceive me so I have that effect that I want to do? And what I came up with on that piece of paper, and it's still just as true now as it was then, I want to be a lecturer. I want to tell people the truth about when I'm telling them stories. It's not made up, that it's a real story. They know they're getting history, but it's like they're getting the expert demonstrator, lecturer, but someone who can also do the spooky things that she's talking about. So when people see it, they see what I'm doing, they see what I'm holding, and they perceive the honesty of what it is, because it is honest. But so many people can make it look fake simply because of that, because they don't have that experience. I want to kind of come across with that BBC ethic. I know it's not a channel you would watch regularly, but in the BBC, Lord Reith, when he founded it, the attitude was to educate and entertain. And that is what I want to do. But I want to do it with a style where I demonstrate and lecture, but also put a chill up somebody's spine. I don't get any hecklers. They're probably worried I'll turn them to toads. And they're quite right to worry about that as well. But I want people to see the honesty of what I do and then sit back and think, I'm seeing something different, something quite special, something unique. And I'm going to talk about it once I'm out of this theatre. That's kind of what I want to do.
Yep. So now for the big question. All right. What is your views on witchcraft and witchery? How do you incorporate that into you? How do you identify as a witch, and what are your views on all that jazz?
Okay, I'll try and make sure this is under 3 hours long. I do identify as a witch. However, what is a witch? That is a question that could have a million different answers depending on who's asking the question and their viewpoints. A lot of people today, sometimes when I do a presentation, say at Pollock House, which is my main big show, when I do that one, I have people coming up who are Wiccans and say, well, I am a witch. Now, their viewpoint of witchcraft is governed by the modern coven they're in, the modern witchcraft path they are part of, which is brilliant for them, great. I will not disparage that in the slightest. I mean, you go back to the Renaissance times, to Middle Ages, Viking times, witchcraft could be seen as something else. In the Renaissance times, people thought witchcraft essentially was Satanism, not Satanism as might be seen in the American sphere with that 1970s bias, 1980s bias with the Satanic Panic, but as a devil worship thing. That is what some people see it as. Other people will see witchcraft as being something malevolent. Now, every culture and every religion kind of has its own belief in witches, and normally is seen as negative, simply because the priests of, or priestesses of, that established religion kind of want the right to be the one who only does the magic, that no one in the community should be doing it. So witchcraft should be seen under that lens. It could be, anyone could be a witch, depending on what someone else's viewpoint is, because often people's viewpoints are wrong. I was once, because of a place I used to work, I was in a Baptist church interviewing people, and the minister was busy wagging his finger, telling people what for, and he said, "By Jove." And I thought, you're telling people off for using tarot cards, and then you're saying, "By Jove." So you're saying, by the holy ineffable name of Jupiter, the king of all gods. He didn't realize what he was saying. And this is someone from that religion. Now that might seem like I'm making a cheap shot, but he did not realize that. And many people from many religions do not realize what, say, spellcraft is. Most spellcraft was a good thing, which is what that was for. I believe that was for healing. During most shows, I will say to people, "What's this?" And people say, "Voodoo doll." And I say, well, that's one thing that Hollywood is bad for. It's not a voodoo doll. This is a healing effigy. And the reason the pins are in the heart would essentially be there'd be 7 pins or 7 nails, and every morning the healer would, they would have, say, hair of the person they would want to heal on the doll, perhaps toenails, clippings, bit of clothes, that kind of thing, and they would recite a charm for the person to be healed. Might be a version of the Mersberg charms from medieval Germany, in fact, Dark Age Germany, where Wodan and Fol were being invoked during the witchcraft trials of the 16th and 17th century. It was Jesus who was being invoked with it, but that still got you onto the pyre to be burned at the stake. But these things were meant for healing, but that's one of these things that people do not appreciate when they think about witchcraft. They see the negative, they don't see the positive. And really, it would be super if people did some research. Come to see my show, Best Research Going. But apart from that, look at lots of videos online by various professors. Ronald Hutton is a good one. Susanna Lipscomb as well. Wonderful people with wonderful presentations. And they tell the story of what things like this were being used for. And a lot of people don't realize these things. And during the going from Dark Age, medieval into Renaissance times, a lot of the views of witchcraft, and this is what we have come to know today, a lot of these views of witchcraft have been borne out by what the church and state have said. The state has said it because the church has said it. And all of this, when we think about how it began, how do these church people know about witchcraft? Simple answer is they don't. Perhaps they've tortured some poor soul and they've got all sorts of insane nonsense out of them because they simply want to be put to death now because they can't live, they can't work. They just want their lives ended. You've got things such as the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, which was written by Heinrich Kramer. When he had put this together, there are aspects of that book, and I do recommend if someone is interested in the subject, but you've not actually read it, please read it. It is archaic language, so it takes a bit to get your head around. But one of the reasons I say to read it is you have particular parishes in Germany where the writers, in all honesty, tell you there are witches, and witches are women in this, because of course we are weak-willed, and of course we'll just follow Satan without any second thought, because we're just going to fall at his feet. But they had said in this book that there were witches were out there, and we had nests, or we had bowls in which we had male penises. So there are penises in bowls, and we were feeding them oats just to keep them alive and keep them healthy, like little chicks in a nest come the end of spring. And then the witches would be consulted by the gentleman of the day, who would say, "Oh, I want to borrow one for tonight." And they would pay the witch some money, and they would borrow one of these phalluses and go away and have their fun and return it, a bit like some kind of pornographic library service with real life things. And there was one case which was quoted in the Malleus, which the person approaching the witch, who had given evidence to the church, has said he wanted the biggest one. And so, "Oh no, I'm afraid you can't have that one." "Why not?" "Oh, that's been rented out tonight by the village priest." So you've got ridiculous things like this that started this witch panic, and you ended up with so many people being killed out of this. In Scotland, there are, depending on what source you look at, there's between 4,000 and 9,000 people were burned at the stake. Depending on where you get your sources, some people are probably spurting their tea out of their mouth saying, "Oh no, it's 2,500 or whatever," but it depends on your source. In England, it was 400. And then you go to Germany, you had witch trials such as Trier, Bamberg, and Brocken, where over 40,000 people were burned at the stake. That's simply insane.
Wow.
All because of people thinking witches were blighting their butter churn. They did not understand about bacteria. People becoming ill, having epilepsy. "No, I'm afraid someone doesn't have a doll and putting a pin in its back to make you have these fits. You are epileptic." There are so many things like this. And the aspect of witches being women, gentlemen, you need to be a bit worried, because 1/5 of those, in Scotland at least, they were men. But we don't know if they were related to the women, because at that time, women in marriage kept their maiden name. They didn't take their husband's name. So we don't know if they were related or not. And a lot of these people were simply village wise women, healers, cunning men, who wanted, there was no health service. There were no doctors. In fact, the medical profession was in its infancy. And because it's in its infancy, they wanted the business. They had been to Notre Dame, they had been to Verona, to Montpellier, to Glasgow, Oxford, Cambridge, to these really top-notch universities to learn to be doctors. And then they go out in the town, and because they're charging fees, no one is going to them for business. But the local healer will accept some eggs and a chicken to cook for her dinner as payment. So these early doctors did not mind these healers being put to death. But the other aspect of that is the church and state were aware these people were important. They were vital to the well-being of the populace. So they made sure they killed a number of them, but not all. A quantity always remained because they needed that medical service within the community. And all of these stories of meeting the devil at midnight and so on, lots of these stories were invented because of torture, as I said, a lot of these people, they were not going to be treated according to modern justice rules. In some cases, modern justice rules kind of sucks, but a lot of these people would not be well to work. They would just be left in the street and they would just die, so they might as well have a quick exit to this world, was their thought process with coming out with all this stuff. But something else that a lot of people speak about, and I use this in my witches demonstration, you have the broomstick, flying in the broomstick, and it's one thing I love mentioning, and I know I've digressed amongst a number of topics in this, but the broomstick used to have flying ointments put on the shaft of it, and the witch would be naked, and they would be on the broomstick, and you see all these woodcuts, Dürer and so on, perhaps paintings and drawings by Goya, showing these witches flying off around Brocken, the witches' mountain in Germany, and so on. But the ingredients in the witch's ointment, the flying ointment, had things like mandrake. It had wolfbane, soot, fat, to which the church called it unbaptized child's fat, of course, just to add the horror aspect. But people, when they would have these broomsticks held there, they would just fall flat on the ground, basically, and go on their psychotropic trip to go onto their vision voyage and then wake up as if they've just had a crash landing. So there's lots of really interesting historical and also religious aspects to witchcraft, because some of it is very pagan. Some of it is very modern religious. For instance, it might have Yazidi context, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Sikh, Hindu, Sufi Islam. There's all sorts of different contexts it might be taken into. And that's kind of the beauty of it. It's so expansive and could be seen in a million different ways, just depending on your personal viewpoint. That's why education, where this topic comes in, it's most important.
I agree. Yep. So we do have a question from the peanut gallery here. All right. Dean Thompson wants to know, hoping you can expand on the healing effigy. You found it in the floorboards, but what happens now that it has been removed?
Okay, thank you for your question, Dean. Lovely of you to watch. The healing effigy was under what we call the solum. I don't know if in the USA it has a different name. So you have the floorboards, and then you have the beams underneath, the joists, and then you've got the solum beneath, which is essentially the ground. And that's where it was on that. So someone had been using this for healing and then left it there, or it had 3 nails still in it, so maybe the person wasn't healed, and on, as I say, it's 7 days it would be used, so maybe on day 4 the person pegged it. That's probably what happened, actually. But nothing happens. There's no evil, no nastiness, no spell that's going to come and haunt you. It's not like Curse of the Demon or Night of the Demon, where you hear this clacking noise and some demon is going to just pull you into some power lines or with some runic writing. It's simply an artifact that was used then, and that was the reason. It could be used for the same reason again. It's obviously got that use, that power, if we want to call it, whether we say it's psychological power or it has actual power. But because of that, it perhaps could be used again. People are, if they're unused to this topic, would stand back, unsure of it. But those with knowledge about it would say, can I handle that, please? I just want to feel it because I've never held something that's genuine and old before. So no, nothing bad has ever happened. I've had it for the last 10 years, and it's been part of my show, and it's nice that it gets used so people can see what it was for. It's a lovely thing.
That is fantastic. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat room. This is your opportunity now to finalize to end our evening with some Q&A. But if there are no more questions, I would like to take the moment to thank Cara for being here today. This is one of the most interesting interviews we've had so far, covering a lot of esoteric topics, and very clean too, as far as like getting it, out there in a way that people can understand. It's just I really appreciate that.
Well, it's one of the reasons I do what I do is the wish to enlighten people with what witchcraft was then, how we see it today. And a big aspect of the performance, likes of the Witches of Pollock, or even the ghost tours as well. I know you run ghost tours, and when people can see through the lens of the time, because it's dark, it's nighttime, and we automatically go on to spooky mind. When people see things from this point of view, their minds open up. But the main aspect that I use this for is that if I show someone that doll and they think, okay, that effigy, this is what it's for, okay. But what would happen if you could actually make someone feel the pain of one of those nails? What the fear was at the time? How would you feel? Because it's okay sitting in a theatre and thinking, well, I wouldn't think that if I was back then, because I would realise it would be so stupid. And that's understandable from a modern viewpoint. But if we think about, if you can then see someone feel a stabbing pain in their back, which is one of the things I do in my demonstrations, someone then thinks, help, oh crap, is that real? That's real. She really did that. I don't do that for effect, but for the person to then think, I would have believed that back then. So they can see where they would be on that scale. Self-enlightenment, I suppose. I should have just said that. It would have saved 2 minutes of speech.
Well, I really appreciate it. Oh, one of the bigger witch stories. Oh, let me bring this up. One of the bigger witch stories here in the States would be the Bell Witch story. Are you familiar with the story? And if you had any thoughts on it? Thank you in advance.
Oh, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean. I've heard of it. It's not something I've done much research in. I've been doing research into Salem on your shores, simply because I believe it is a place that a young girl called Janet Douglas was removed to from Edinburgh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit of the story without going too far, because I realised the clock's ticking. But Janet Douglas was apparently from the Scottish Highlands. She was a mute servant, and in 1676 at Pollock House, she had been that Lord George Maxwell had been struck down by infirmity, and apparently it was witches, because he was a big witch finder, a big witch hunter. And she pointed out to a number of people who were witches that had cursed him, and went into their houses and, of course, found those wax dolls. And she knew just where they were, just as if she planted them there, funnily enough. But these people were killed, burned at the stake. Janet Douglas went on to marry a churchman, went to live the high life in Edinburgh, where she then started seeing witches everywhere. And the judge, he decided that she had to go from these shores She was devout, so she really couldn't be put to death for anything. So she was transported, and at that time, transport was to the Americas. And in that year of 1677 that we're speaking about, she was transported to either North Carolina or to Salem. One of the two. And I'm trying to track down, was it Salem? Because when she would have arrived and would have become established, that would have been the time the Salem witch trials had begun.
Wow.
So was she involved in instigating that one too? I think she would have changed her name because of her notoriety, but it would be wonderful to know if she was really there. I'm sure you see why.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting to think about that. My thoughts on that is I would like to think that is true.
Yes.
But to focus on a little bit on Dean's specific question, I have actually been to the Bell Witch cave site and to the reproduction of the Bell Witch house in Adams County, Tennessee, in the United States. Investigated that quite a bit, actually. It was the most. It was the same weekend I participated in the most dreadful canoe ride of my entire life. And it was the last time I actually went canoeing.
It made an impression then.
Yes, it did. It was I was there with Troy Taylor and Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and a few other established paranormal investigators and researchers at the time. So
there wasn't a banjo playing in the shore, was there?
No. Thankfully, it was during the drought season. That made the canoe ride much the worst for wear because of the constant running into sandbars and that sort of thing. Yeah. I do not remember it fondly. I actually, if it were a race, I would have won though because I was half hour ahead of every other canoeer in this trip. It was the Red River in Adams County that goes through Tennessee, and the only reason I was that far ahead of everyone, it was because I angry paddled my way to the end of it. So I was having such a miserable time. But Nadine, are you still watching the? Are you still watching? All right, good. All right, so if you're still watching, please type in the chat there. I want to. If you don't mind, I'm going to do an ESP experiment, Cara.
Super.
Yeah, because we have a rare opportunity. All right, great, fantastic, Nadine. Thank you for popping in. She's right there. Yep. Okay. So Nadine, here's what's interesting is that you were there with us at the haunted Lord Baltimore Hotel. Me and Cara at the theater, at the hotel, participating in these psychic experiments. So you were and do you know that these haunted locations, they're like capacitors for psychic energy and haunting phenomena? This is a popular theory with parapsychologists and paranormalists that's been around for decades. When you're exposed to that much phenomena, not only the haunted hotel, but also in the presence of people who practice the dark arts, but also are so ingrained into psychic activity and phenomena and research, this has an effect on those around them as well. Nadine, would you be willing to participate in a psychic experiment for ESP? I'll wait for your answer. There's like a 10-second delay because of how this works.
Hopefully Nadine's watching and can
she is.
She's
watching, yeah. Absolutely fantastic. She is willing to participate. Okay, so Nadine, I have these ESP cards. They're called Zener cards. They're developed by Carl Zener and J.B. Ryan for the Ryan Research Center in the early. I made them for this streaming format. These are internet-friendly ESP cards. Okay, and I would like you to make a prediction with me. I'm gonna pick up one of these random cards. Okay. All right, and I have it right here. Now I want you to focus on this card. I'm going to try to, I'm looking at it. I'm sending this out to you. I want you to tell me, Nadine, what you think this card is. What is this card? Put your response into the chat. And I'll bring it up.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. Once again, there's a significant delay. So please be... All right. So she said 3 squiggly lines. Now that's interesting. I'm going to bring that up here before I reveal the card. But here it is. Now, that's possibly just luck. All right, let's be honest, okay? Because everyone knows 3 squiggly lines from Ghostbusters. All right, so I want to shuffle these around a little bit one more time. I want to hold.
I prefer it when people call it rashers of bacon.
That's right. Well, that's what Paul Prater calls it. He calls it bacon. So I'm going to hold up another card. Nadine, this is another card. Can you tell me what you think this card is? One more try. Maybe 2 more tries with this one right now. Depends on how fast you answer. What card is this?
The internet is so finicky. You can have these delays that we can speak in real time, but add it to text.
All right. Square, circle, plus sign, star. Okay. Square, squiggly lines, plus sign, circle, star. Okay. All right. One more attempt. I just wish this was not that slow response. It's not Nadine's fault. It's delayed because of the how this works. So I want to hold another card up. All right, what is the card that I'm holding up?
You're speaking to Nadine.
That is correct. If I ask you, they'll just think that we, are in cahoots.
And they would most likely be right.
Yeah. All right. So Nadine says star, but here's what's interesting. It is, in fact, a star. And we're going to put that up there. So, like she said, star. And I was holding this up the entire time. And you can track this back on YouTube and look at the comments and the times. It is a star, as a matter of fact. Nice upside down pentacle, actually. All right.
Naturally. All
right. So very interesting results, Nadine. Thank you so much for your response. If I want to ask Cara. I want to hold up another card. Hold on for a second. I'm going to hold up another card. And while I'm thinking, Cara, Nadine, you have one more attempt to say what this card is. But Cara, thank you so much for participating in today's interview. Thank you so much for coming on here. I know it's very late there, and your energy, is kind of, it's probably draining a little bit at 1 a.m.
It's midnight hour. It's the witching hour. I have things to stir in cauldrons. It's totally fine, honestly. Mm-hmm. Between 12 midnight and 3 a.m., that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, the plus sign, there's 3 wavy lines was the first one. Frankie says bacon. So anyway, I think we're going to let this go because it's just taking taking a little too long. But anyway, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Cara, for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me on, and thank you to everyone for watching. Any questions, you've seen my website on the screen, just chat to me.
Yep. If you ever have a chance to see Cara perform, it is a wonderful experience. She's one of the best stage presences I've seen in recent years, and she'll be in Baltimore again in August. That's right, at Bizarre Hauntings. Go to bizarrehauntings.com and sign up for the conference. For Bizarre Hauntings conference, if you haven't done it already, things are looking really good. We're fairly confident that the conference will be going on as planned because of how things are moving along with the event, with how things are rolling out in the United States. The much better plan that we have now than we did last year, because the last year's plan apparently was not a thing that existed. So now we have a plan. So it's looking good. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for helping out. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Cara, again. You're amazing and wonderful. And please go to Cara's. I'll bring it up one more time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can find out about future upcoming interviews and performances. We're always putting up new videos on posemagic.com. And if you want to check out Cara and what she's up to, go to carahamilton.co.uk and check her out and what she's doing. And Cara, once again, thank you. Cara, by the way, is working on a top secret project. So
yes.
I hope you paid attention to that video at the beginning, because there's some hints and tidbits in there, I think. But will be more information, I'm sure, will be rolling out very soon. Thank you.
It is so exciting too.
Yes, it is. Bye. Bye, Cara.
Bye.